So, welcome to today's podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm solo, and at the time of this recording, it's getting into springtime of year. Baseball's in full swing. You got a lot of activity with finally getting warmer in my neck of the woods in the Northeast. So, I love this time of year. I'm a kind of a warm weather guy, so spent most of my life in the Northeast. So, I got used to the winters, but I'm starting to realize it maybe isn't for me. But that's for another day. But this is a great time of year, and with two kids and one younger who's big into sports, he's finally gotten into baseball. So baseball is a slow sport. I know for some who don't like it, but it's one I grew up playing, loved it. It's such a tremendous part of my childhood and so many great memories. And it's really cool to watch my son start playing. This is his first year kind of really getting into it, and so he's excited. So you kind of see the energy building, and it can be a very difficult sport to learn. Yes, in a lot of other sports, you can maybe just use your natural athletic ability to kind of get by. You run real fast, whatever the case may be. But baseball has a lot of skill to it. And as my son's quickly learning that it's not as easy as it looks, even though you watch these big time ball players just knock it out of the park and hit home runs, and the crowd loves you, and it's a amount of work that they've probably put in over those years is quite tremendous. And so I'm kind of watching my son as he's getting into this and learning something new that he loves, and he just there's so many aspects about the game he loves, but he starts playing it, it's getting very frustrating. And this is again his first year, so he's probably taken less than had less than 100 at bats in his lifetime, and he's still thinking that he should be able to do it better. And he's getting humble, and it's difficult, right? And anything we start, and it takes courage, it takes dedication, and certainly responsibility to keep learning and taking things in stride and growing, and that's just kind of part of life, right? And anything we do from as we're learning, and certainly our financial lives. But for him, as he's learning how to swing a bat and get the mechanics right, it starts small, and it's even being able to swing it right, and growing from striking out all the time to maybe at least making some contact along the way, which is starting to happen, and actually putting the ball in play, which seems like a simple thing, but it can be very difficult when you have people throwing at you and throwing hard as you get older. And so it's taken some time, but he's seeing some progress. He's putting the work in, he's learning. And so I thought this was really an interesting parallel to a lot of things we do financially. And yes, we want to hit those home runs in our investing, in our financial lives, but usually it starts with just getting some at bats and sort of learning along the way, learning about yourself and how you think and feel about investments, and growing into them, and potentially getting a single before you start even thinking about home runs. It's just kind of building that expertise and learning along the way, and hopefully that builds over long periods of time. And so when I talk to folks nowadays, certainly around investing, I think people are starting to realize if they've stayed in the space of primarily investing in the stock market through their work 401k, IRAs, or brokerage accounts, and the stock market is primarily what they know, they're starting to realize that maybe there's opportunity to invest elsewhere. And for those with significant amounts of income or additional wealth, there are tremendous other opportunities to diversify into a whole host of different areas. And so this is where, when I'm talking to folks, I hear that people are starting getting interested in things like real estate. And real estate is not what people obviously would come across as they're building wealth traditionally, especially in their jobs, because they're starting with smaller dollars and starting to grow. And so the stock market is probably a good starting point to at least get your feet wet in investing. But as people start building their wealth and started exploring it, and maybe seeing if they like or dislike it, they started asking questions. And that's exactly what happened to me, right? I started realizing that I didn't love all the volatility, and I didn't know much about what was going on. And so I ventured into other spaces. And so what today I want to just kind of cover off for those who are maybe contemplating getting into real estate And when to hit those home runs, it starts with obviously the fundamentals and learning more about it. So I'll kind of use myself as a guide to share kind of how I went through it, and you take it for your own journey into it. But I started off and got very interested in real estate less than 10 years ago. And I started really diving into it, and I'm just a natural learner in terms of my nature. I like to research things and learn stuff. And so for people who are thinking about getting to real estate, want to jump in, they got antsy, they've got a lot of money sitting in the bank account, it's probably wise to start getting educated, because most people are not fully educated around real estate. They may have obviously familiarity with their home that they maybe rent or own. And so if you own, you have a kind of fundamental idea about buying a property and all the costs associated, maintenance, but never really maybe thought of it as an investment, other than the thought that hopefully our home grows in value, which we know, over a long periods of time it has, but there's certainly no guarantee of that happening. And there's a lot of expenses that go into maintaining a home as a primary residence. And there's hosts of different analytics you can have around whether owning a home is a good investment or not. I don't really look at it as an investment. It's a place to live and as an expense. If it goes up in value, that's a bonus. But I don't think of it as an investment because it doesn't create much passive income. There's no real guarantee that any of this is going up in value. So if it does, that's a good thing. But I'm not using it as an investment. But then when you have to shift your gears and think about it as an investment, the game changes quite a bit. So that's why I would encourage folks who are really contemplating getting into real estate. And they say, where do I start? Well, it's probably not to invest in anything yet. I think it really starts with you getting educated, learning about yourself as an investor, and getting comfortable with what maybe are good opportunities for you personally. Because the thing I would hate people to get into is investments that they can't stand to own or look at, and causes them other anxieties and stress that, frankly, I don't even know if it's worth it, even if there's extra money tied to it. It just maybe is not a good fit. And this is where people have to kind of come to their own realization on that through their own research, and certainly talking to experts and others in the field. So start with books. Like I started Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's tons of resources around real estate, as you would imagine, because it has built a lot of wealth for people over the years. So there's tremendous amounts of books around it to help get you educated. I started also in Bigger Pockets. That was newer at the time, but now it's blossomed into a tremendous resource for people to connect with other real estate investors who are thinking about it, and learn everything you can around it, and get yourself comfortable and educated around what are some options for you. I listen to Ken McElroy too. He's in the multifamily space, but tremendous experts and advice out there to consume and just kind of get started. And it kind of feeds off of that. And so that's where I would start for most people, getting certainly your education started. And, the second part of it certainly would help me along the way as I started just meeting other people who are also interested in real estate. And certainly I can, again, this is the podcast to help share you some of my experiences, but, go attend a real estate meetup, meet other aspiring real estate investors, because they may be in the same boat as you, as kind of in the starting gates of trying to think about real estate investing, and you can commune with people who are kind of at your level, and maybe even find ways to help each other out. But you might stumble across some people who are much farther along in your real estate journey, and perhaps maybe you can strike up a good relationship with them in a organic manner. And you might find out you might be able to help each other out, and you find more connections. You start really just learning the lingo in the game. And if you think of it with that mindset, you're going to have more fun with it. It's going to be fun to enjoy it and learn it. And you'll see whether it's a good start to see if it's a good fit for you or not. I started going to real estate meetups too when I was in the early stages, just to kind of see what it was like. Who are the types of people they can be a little daunting, right? Because you're in such an unfamiliar space with people you don't know, and maybe that's worthwhile. Maybe go with a partner or a spouse just to kind of, be each other's wing people. But this is where you kind of almost have to put yourself out there and start meeting people. And you may be surprised on how much people want to share and give, and a lot of people are looking for partners. Real estate is a team sport. There's a lot of players involved. You need to know and understand, and recognizing that you're not going to probably be able to plow through this by yourself. So met my first partner at a real estate meetup. I had not made any real estate investments other than the purchase of my home. And I met him through a meetup and started learning about him over time. We got to chatting. He became a friend of mine, and just started learning about his business and his track record of what he was doing and where he was going. And through the course of our relationship over time, I recognized that he had a tremendous amount of expertise and firsthand knowledge in, say, the owning, as being a landlord, owning smaller units and renting them out. But what he was quickly finding out, he was missing opportunities because he didn't have enough resources, and a lot of the other resources that maybe through hard money lending were getting very expensive. So what I had was a lot more cash. So that was where we were able to partner together and help each other out. And so I got to learn quite a bit and help him progress in his real estate investments by loaning him money, and we struck up that relationship. That's how it started. And so this is where it's always important to ask what is it that they're going through, whoever you talk to, and how can you help them? Give first. I think that's a good mantra in general. I think we can get so enamored with our own sort of selfish interests, which is important to have, right? We all are our own best advocates, but when you're dealing with people, it's always great to kind of understand, how can I help them? How can I help them grow? And maybe we could work together. So just something to keep in mind. And so through that, I got to work with him, obviously through some of his deals, learn more about it. He was willing to share more along the way, and we struck up a great relationship, and we did quite a bit of work together. And eventually working with him, he helped me secure my own first property of buying a distressed property, getting it rented, fixed up, rented out. And as you go through your own real estate investing education, applied the BRRRR method, which is buy, renovate, rent, and refinance. And through the course of that effort, because I bought it right, renovated it, rented it out in a good market, and then 6 months later, refinance it out. And this is obviously during days when refinancing was much cheaper. You can get some great rates. I literally put all my money in. I got all the money out that I put into this thing, and additional money on top of that, and secured a long-term note on the property. And so literally I have no more money left in this property, and it just creates a cash flow for me. And it's hopefully a growing asset that, appreciates in time too. But I have it leveraged, and I had more money out than I put in, and was able to start using those dollars to invest elsewhere. So that's how it can work, right? And again, this is getting back to the baseball analogies. I started with some singles and learning some things, and I would say that one was probably a good double, right? It was a really good one, maybe even triple. It really was a great deal, but it took time to get comfortable with that, learn the parts of it before I did anything. And that was probably a couple year long journey to kind of do that. And then I sort of recognized that, just like I alluded to earlier in this podcast, is having good teams around you and resources and experts to really partner with. And I started learning more about, investing in other markets. And then through the course of that, and this was an industry that was born out of people wanting to get into real estate, but maybe in their local markets, it just wasn't economically viable, right? Because it was just too costly to pay for properties, or the taxes were just so high, or it wasn't landlord friendly, which a lot of people, I live in an area that isn't really landlord friendly. So this is where I started investing outside in, they call them turnkey providers, where you have people in markets that are best suited for real estate and renting, certainly single family duplexes, where they would have renovation. They would secure the property, renovate them, and then they'd sell them to investors. And so and then they would manage those properties for you in local markets. So I started diving into that area and secured a bunch of properties that way through turnkey providers that were experts in renovation, and certainly even property management, which is hugely key as you get into that and learning more about it. Yes, buying the properties right is important, but especially if you're going to have that property long term, to have someone to properly manage it if you don't want to do it. And maybe it's worthwhile doing to start nearby if that's something you want, that you feel uncomfortable with, that getting a feel for what management is like. What are some of the big things you got to think of? It gives you that learning sort of an experience that helps you think about whether you want to do it. Maybe you enjoy it. There are people who do like property management. I'm not a personal fan of it, but you don't know until you kind of experience it. And at least at minimum, you get to understand like what are the key things to be thinking about when you're kind of testing out property management. But through this turnkey providers, and now there's a lot of them out there that exist in different markets around the country. And that's why I developed my portfolio to kind of go around different markets that I felt fit a certain need in my financial life, whether it's, trying to get more cash flow or higher growth areas, and sort of balance out my personal rental real estate portfolio. And so as I've grown in my real estate investing sort of experience and knowledge base, I sort of, and then certainly your cash flow and assets start growing too, is, you get exposed to other options too. And this is especially for those who are, high income earners or have large businesses and larger net worths, then you have an opportunity even to go further into, if you're an accredited investor you have to have like over $1 million of net worth outside your home, or make about, 300,000 as a couple, right? Then you're considered accredited and offers some opportunities outside of what folks who don't have those incomes or assets can access. And these are kind of private placements. They could be securing apartment syndicators, where they sort of operators that go secure rent apartment complexes and bring investors in as limited partners. And you're part of this general partnership, and you're a limited partner. So obviously you're involved with the deal, but you have obviously limited liability outside of your investment. So you could lose your investment, clearly. But the general partners who are running the operation are the ones who are more held liable if things go haywire, if there's lawsuits, etc. All we are as limited partners in that environment is we have subject to loss of our money. So you can play in that role and get part of larger deals that are going on. And that's where I migrated to too, because I recognize rental property is great, but they come with other things, right? In management of getting the corporate structures around them and managing the property managers and all those things that you'll learn along the way. But I recognize that you want to diversify and get into other areas like apartment complexes and mobile home parks and self-storage. And those are ways that you can get into them. And we have provided, some podcasts on this show that talks through some of those experts to share some of those things. But, this is just to open up your eyes that there are opportunities there. But this is where you grow and learn and start figuring out what's right for you. If you want to be more of a passive player in this could be a great place for people. If they're busy with their jobs or businesses, but they still want exposure to larger real estate type investments, these sort of syndications can be a tremendous opportunity to get cash flow as well as benefits from a tax perspective, and minimize some of the liability associated with these types of investments. So there's hosts of different varieties of those, and but it does take learning the deals and the operators and really trying to manage risk, because this is where you get to meet with some of the operators, but it's important to ask them questions and understand how they operate. And so that comes with some due diligence expertise, which we'll do another podcast separately on that to help you through that. And through the course of all of this is, I've, going back to some of the concepts we've talked about on this show around using storing money and storing in the family bank and, in using infinite banking, is that's where the storage of money sits. And then as your wealth accumulates there, that you can deploy them into things like this in real estate, and they go hand in hand pretty well, and you can use that for financing when needed. And so, and certainly for emergencies, right, to store cash. So that's kind of how they fit together. And certainly if you want to talk more about that, I'm more than happy to share more about that. And so that's all I wanted to share today is just to give you a flavor that, if you want to get into things like real estate and or any investment for that matter, whether Bitcoin or other areas, that you've got to take the time to learn it. And or it's just going to, in my mind, add tremendous amounts of risk to what you're doing. And maybe for some of your portfolio and your money, that's okay. But this is where you grow and learn and become more active in your investment and taking a little bit more ownership of that. Because I think as you go and learn that, you either will find out it's not right for you, or it's something that you want to continue to grow and learn more and plan for it. And I think ultimately that reduces your overall risk and gives you a higher chance to hit those home runs as you gain more expertise and build the teams around you. So hopefully this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Perennial Pride Podcast.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride Podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.